Hello, everybody. We are moving now to Volker Beckman. I'm glad we found Volker. Volker Beckman is going to deal with SDG 15, the volume that deals with transitioning to sustainable life on land.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present the book Transitioning to Sustainable Life on Land. Thanks to MDPI and thanks for the series editor for making this possible. So first of all, I would like to remind you or remind me what SDG 15 is about. So it's about the protection, restoration, and the promotion of sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. So before we go further, I would like to present some facts. First of all, well, land roughly covers 1/3 of the planet Earth's surface area, but it is estimated that it harbors more than 80% of the global biomass. So land, from a biomass perspective, is highly important. It is also estimated that land harbors 75% of all species. So the number of species is, the total number is estimated with 8.7 million. Of course, humans, they are land-based, and over our history, of course, land use increased tremendously on a global scale. It is again estimated that 75% of the land surface area has been directly affected by human activities. Well, we can also say that actually today, indirectly, everything is affected by humans. In terms of land use, globally, agriculture has the biggest share, with about 1/3 of the total terrestrial area. This is followed then by forests and shrubs, and they are used to different degrees. Settlements, although of course of increasing importance, but in terms of land use, they still cover only 1% of the habitable land. But land use and the human impacts are increasingly recognized as exceeding the planetary boundaries, in particular regarding biodiversity, nutrient cycles, and greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, climate change is one of maybe the biggest threat also to biodiversity on Earth. There are estimations that we are at the beginning of the 6th great extinction, with a risk of losing 75% of all species. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem estimates that we are at the risk of losing 1 million species out of this 8.7. Well, we have to recognize that this happens despite significant conservation efforts. So there are scientists that say that protected areas, they exploded since the 1890s, and today we have almost 16% of the terrestrial area is protected to different extents. But obviously we are not able to halt these developments. And some argue that, of course, we need a more integrated approach. It's not just to extend the protected areas, but we need to integrate conservation into, well, different human activities. And from this perspective, we can also see the Sustainable Development Goals. And well, Sustainable Development Goal 15 is one among 17. It comes, well, pretty much to the end, but it's an integrated part. Okay, as it was already mentioned, usually, well, we do not only have 17 goals, but each goal has targets and specific targets and also indicators. And this goal has 11 targets and even more indicators. And there are debates about are the indicators sufficient. I don't want to go now into all these details, but this is somehow the background. Now to the structure of the book and its contribution. So essentially, I divided the book into 5 different parts. So the first is about goals. So of course, well, goal 15 in relationship to other sustainability goals, synergies, trade-offs, but also more fundamental questions of values and ethics of conservation and restoration. The second part then focused more on ecosystem restoration in cultivated landscapes. So it's yeah, pretty much focused on, well, on situation where humans already use most of the land. And okay, what are the problems of ecosystem restoration in these cases? The third part deals with land property rights and governance. And well, human societies, they have developed over history important institutions that are related to land administration, for example, property, well, ownership of land. States are defined by their territory, so it's of course land-based. Well, most of our governance structures, they are somehow also related to space and land. The fourth part, it's political and societal challenges, so about the transformation towards these objectives. So you see that the structure of the book does not precisely follow any kind of well, specific target, but is more cross-cutting and also tries to well, set some new lights on this transition. So I don't want to go into the details of the different contributions, just to give you an idea. The first part is composed out of 3 contributions. So Clem Tisdale, he's from the University of Queensland in Australia. And in his contribution, he really very well, from an economic point of view, reflects on the Sustainable Development Goals and synergies and trade-offs with an economic perspective. Ott and Raimund, they try to integrate economics of valuing nature with the, well, philosophy and well, more philosophical valuation and reflection on nature. Ziegler, in his contribution, this is something which is very much related to growth, and he well, develops the idea of nature respecting sufficiency. So it's of course related to also some discussion about, do we need degrowth? Degrowth debate in order to, well, create room for nature, for other species also to develop. The second part consists of 4 contributions. And here we have Germany. We also have there the Alps. This is the contribution by Stefan Zerbe. We have the perspective of Central Asia. And also something which is important in our region, in particular in the northern part of Europe, it's peatland. And peatland is, you can call the utilization of peatland today as a degradation. So because we need to drain peatland, we make it dry. And with this drainage, we affect biodiversity, but also greenhouse gas emissions. So this is an important factor where you, with the re-wetting of peatland, you may also be able to contribute to, well, mitigate climate change as well as to enhance biodiversity. But well, most of the land is used. and it's in intensive use. And this is the problem. The third part also has 4 contributions focusing on property rights and governance. In China and Ethiopia, both are countries that heavily rely on state ownership, state and collective ownership. And well, then a situation which refers to Germany. This is Thiesfeld and Curtis. And Neudert, she's looking at pastures in Central Asia and the Caucasus. And we have very diverse ownership structures, very diverse governance structures. And she tries to disentangle this and how this is related to pasture conservation or pasture degradation. So all these reflect on the importance of different ownership structures and governance structures for sustainable land use, but also for biodiversity conservation. The last part reflects on different situation. It's related to agriculture policy in the EU. Organic farming, which is presumed to be quite biodiversity friendly and will also preserve the soil fertility. But well, in Indonesia, organic farming has a very, very small share in the whole farming sector. We also have a contribution that links conservation with the bioeconomy. So when we want to get rid of fossil fuels, we need to use more biomass. And we need to utilize more biomass in the future, maybe, which needs to be done in a sustainable way. We need new crops. We need new life that might be created also by biotechnology. So this biotechnology issue is, of course, something which is, humans nowadays, they create new life also to solve problems. The final contribution is about forest, about the idea of zero deforestation and how this relates to sustainable and just transitions. Yeah, I now would like to would highlight 3 papers to give you a little bit more an idea about how this volume is also unique, because it opens up new perspectives. So Hampeke, in his contribution, focused very much on German agriculture and how this relates to SDG 15. Well, originally it's not included. Agriculture, it's SDG 2, or it's located somewhere else. But so what does it has to do with agriculture? So in Germany, as in many other countries, over time, well, humans and nature, they co-evolved. It's happening every day, everywhere, that nature adjusts, humans adjust, and somehow there is a co-evolution. So, of course, Germany, agriculture in Germany, it lasts for centuries. And so what we observe that the number of extinct species and the number of threatened species, they are mostly related to certain kind of agriculture. Because these species, they are adapted to agriculture. They rely on agriculture, but not highly intensive agriculture, but more extensive agriculture. What you see here, it's the biotopes and the number of extinct species. You see that it's not about forest or others, but it's mainly about agriculture. Here, mainly also crops, grassland. But then again, I mentioned peatland. So these are biotopes in contact with agriculture or influenced. So also the number of species in those biotopes that are threatened are higher than in the forests. So this means that to achieve these goals, agriculture needs to be in the focus. And it's not about creating protected areas, but it's about changing also, well, agriculture to a more biodiversity friendly agriculture. So the second contribution I would like to highlight is from China. Maybe you know that China, of course, it's well, heavily debated, but in terms of property right, it's state-owned and collective-owned land. So land is not owned by any individual. Individuals have use rights. This article is about land consolidation system in China, and it tells a story how this evolved. And you see in this table that it starts really, okay, what does land consolidation mean? It means, okay, you rearrange land, which might be small pieces. You might make larger pieces out of a couple of smaller pieces. So you see how this, in this table quite nicely, how this developed over time. The focus when it started was purely on food production. Then the urban rural equity came into play. And since 2030, also the ecosystem somehow is included. So also China is working on something they call the ecological red line. They have different red lines in terms of, for example, cultivated land, there is a red line, but they also try to define ecological red line. So also China, well, developed along this line that yes, they are including, well, ecosystem and biodiversity values into planning systems, but it's not really that far as we would like it to be. So it goes in this direction, but still there is a lot to do. So the final paper I would like to highlight is about agriculture policy. And what you see here, the European agriculture policy spends a hell of money on agriculture, but it's mainly spent, as you see here, this 71% of all the money, of the money goes to the first pillar. What does it mean? It's a payment per hectare without any, well, specific focus on biodiversity or conservation or something. But you see here that most are, okay, just 5.5% is spent on environmental and 7.7% on investment. So, and then what is shown here is the priority given by farmers and given by citizens. And you see that even farmers, they would like to shift more of the resources to the environment. But in particular, this is the wish of the citizens. But the paper shows quite impressively how the political system works, and that, okay, it moves in this direction, but the movement is very, very slow. And there are lots of course, well, vested interest that will prevent, well, the SDG 15, that to mobilize significant increase in financial resources from all sources to conserve and sustainable use biodiversity and ecosystems. So, and it shows how difficult it is to transform such a policy arena. Okay, this is what I would like to say about this volume. Again, thanks to MDPI Books and the series editor for the initiatives and great support. And well, thank you very much for your attention, and have a nice read.
Wonderful, but I will not let you go yet. I've
Sure.
asked difficult questions earlier to the editors of the others. I would like to ask you a question I have been asked and see if you can come up with an answer that I can borrow from. You started actually, you were much closer when you presented your SDG. You actually used a slightly more extended definition of it, and then you showed us the targets and the indicators. Now, despite that, if I understand the contributions well enough, they actually are not so much focused on targets and on indicators. Now, how would you evaluate this? Because I see that there's a lot of, not just in the social, but in most sciences, when people are actually working and take very seriously the Sustainable Development Goals, still their work tends to be rather removed from targets and indicators. So how would you position that? Is it an asset or is that a problem?
Yeah, I agree. So that yeah, many contributions, they actually are not exactly focusing on those indicators. So I would, what perhaps one contribution which I try to also to initiate would be about protected areas. And one of the arguments that are nowadays made is, okay, one possibility is we just need to extend the protected area. Yeah, that's the way we need to go. Of course, this is not covered in the volume because it's actually focusing on sustainable use, so to say. And well, the sustainable use, actually, there is almost no defined indicator in the indicator set. So the indicator set is very much, it's very simplistic, I would say.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the main reason that I also see that if we really want to solve, yeah, if we really want to aim at sustainable development, it's about the sustainable use is perhaps the most important part of it. And I said that this contribution, for example, by Wessler and Silberman about the bioeconomy and biotechnology, it's that we use nature in a certain way, maybe also more intensively. And the question is how do we then create this in harmony with the conservation? You know, perhaps in conservation theory, it's about separation and integration. And this volume, it mainly argues for integration and not so much about separation. And of course, the debate about wilderness, where there's, humanly used, it's an old debate, which I think it's, of course, many societies, they want to keep also some wilderness area. But we also note that, it's not really, nothing is without human impact anymore. So also the wilderness areas, they are affected by human activities. So, and therefore, I would say it's, it's more about sustainable use. And we have to admit that in terms of sustainable use, the indicators are not well developed.
Yeah. Well, this actually in many ways parallels what in 2015, just after the ratification of the Agenda 2030, was reported by Jeffrey Sachs, who said, again, I repeat what I said earlier, that in his mind, there are too many SDGs. And he doesn't even want to talk about the number of targets and indicators, because if you look at them carefully, according to him, there are too many and there's not enough of indicators. And that goes in a little bit in the direction that you have been arguing. So thank you so very much to everybody.